Alright, what's going on, everybody? It's Jimmy James coming at you with some Age of Empires 2 content. Been meaning to make some Age of Empires content for YouTube for quite some time. Haven't really figured out a niche. I'm going to try to develop that with this video. Tier lists are very popular in Age of Empires, and so I wanted to give a bit of a different take on tier lists than have been seen before. And what I want to do in this video is I want to do a 1v1 Arabia tier list for AOE2 DE, but focus on the tier list at mid-ELO levels of gameplay. I've often heard Hera, shout out to Hera, who has a great Twitch stream, great YouTube stream. I also stream on Twitch myself. You can find information on my stream in the description below. But I've often heard Hera say that Goths can be strong at low levels and are pretty bad at high levels of gameplay. And I think you could apply that to a lot of different civilizations, and I think it reflects a truth that games at mid-ELO, with players who have a pretty good academic knowledge of the game and are quite good at the game, actually, in a sort of absolute sense, they still, compared to high ELO gameplay in the competitive scene, are very different in terms of how they play out. So this video is based on my reflections as a mid-ELO player there in that mid 13 to 1400s, the games that I play with my teammates, and comparing that to what we tend to see at the high level professional scene, and how it plays out differently. And so just to give you an idea, of the basis here of how I'm thinking about it, I'm not going to talk about each point here. But basically, mid-ELO players, they have a strong academic knowledge of the game, have played, hundreds, if not thousands of games even, but they're still taken aback by unusual situations. The efficiency is not quite as good as a high level. It's still pretty decent, but it's not great, right? Games can be very aggressive at a mid-ELO rating, whereas at, say, a low ELO rating, so below a sort of 1,000 or maybe below 900, games often just take a long time, right? But that's not the same at the mid-ELO. Games can be very aggressive, but when they are aggressive, they tend to get sloppy because the macro behind that aggression is often not quite there. Similarly with micro is often decent, right? Moving units around, but it's, you still will lose. You're just going to most mid-ELO players are often still pretty nervous when they're, say, microing archers or expos and a mangonel comes creeping. And so what that means is that when we look at, say, our tier list, the S-tier civs are going to be those civs. They're great in every age. They're really smooth to play, and they just have so many power options that it's hard to stop even when you know it's coming, because your gameplay as a mid-ELO player is just not refined enough to deal with that kind of power. A-tier civs are going to be pretty darn good in a lot of phases. They'll have good power spikes. They'll be flexible. They'll be difficult to predict. They'll, be pretty strong economically, or they'll at least have that if they don't have one of the other criteria. This is not a list where every condition is necessary to have. We're not trying to check all the boxes here. Oftentimes a civ may have one of these things, or maybe two out of the three or 3 out of 4. So, it's kind of a sort of holistic list here. I'm just giving some examples here. B-tier civs are going to suffer from at least some limitation, right? And they may have other options, right? But their gameplay is nevertheless predictable. Eco bonuses might be marginal, or perhaps they just don't pay off until much later in the game. And so the fact that, so you have some of these together, and it comes down to it, they're just not the easiest to play. Right? But they still have something. They still have things going for them, right? So, whereas in C-tier civs, and we're not gonna have any D-tier civs because the game is pretty balanced on 1v1 Arabia right now. So I think C-tier is probably the lowest we'll go. They just have some major deficiencies that impact multiple phases of the game, and they're just difficult civilizations to play, right? And they either lack power, or if they do have power, they're easily countered. So, anyways, that's the basis. Let's go into the list, and we are going to start with the Aztecs, and I will make a note anytime here I think a civilization would appear differently in a higher level tier list than it would here. Going to be a lot of similarities, but I think you'll see there's some key differences. But that won't be with the Aztecs. Aztecs, easy S tier civilization, really strong early age eco bonus that helps in the early, mid, late phases of the game. Strong military bonus that helps, even getting units out in Dark Age, Feudal Age, etc. Their Castle Age Eagle spam is very strong and can be very difficult to deal with because eagles are a bit less common to deal with in general, and the fact that Aztecs can produce them so fast and have the eco behind it. Aztecs do a really nice job of covering their bases, or if you go infantry, they have decent arbalist, even though they're missing thumb ring. You also have jaguar warriors. Going cavalry, you do have decently strong pikemen to deal with that. And once you get Garland Wars, at least, arbalist, you have good skirmishers. So, you know, there's a lot of things going for Aztecs that are really good. Okay. Next on the list of Berbers. Berbers are going to go into A tier, right? Berbers are probably more of a B tier civ at a higher level, but at the A tier, right, they just deal so well with power units and getting the really strong units out in Castle Age. You have the stable discount that really helps you crank out knights, and that is a major advantage. You can get to camels, so even if you fall behind, let's say, you can use camels to kind of help you bail out against somebody else's knights. You have some pretty nice trash units, even though you are missing halberdier, but you have great skirmishers, really cheap hussars as you get through the game, and the Camel Archer for Berbers is a great unit that can counter heavy cav archers of other civilizations and even go toe-to-toe with other archer units. A little bit harder to get to, but you just have some really diverse options, and it's that stable bonus can really help you pull yourself out of a hole or really help you outmass an opponent that might not have the most efficient economy to keep up with you. Bohemians are going to go into C tier. This might be a higher tier in a pro list, but they're just difficult to play at a mid-ELO level. Your cavalry's not very good. Your archers are a little bit awkward because to really get to a good advantage, right, you have to build a university, you have to research chemistry, which takes a long time. It's nice when you have it, but you're also missing thumb ring, so that can become pretty awkward in terms of, are you really getting the DPS out of those units that you could be? You can make hand cannoneers in Castle Age, but you can't do that with any other civs, so it's hard to integrate in your gameplay. Your mining eco bonuses are cool, but getting the faster collection rates with villagers moving faster, you got to research those at the monastery. Mid-ELO players are probably more likely to forget about those. So it's just an awkward civilization to play, and they have some military weaknesses, and mid-ELO players are probably not taking advantage of them on Arabia to the same extent that a pro player would. Arena might be a different story, though. Okay, Britons are going right into S tier. Great eco bonuses both in Dark Age and early Castle Age with the town centers costing less wood. They have pretty reasonable trash units to complement their amazing archers, and so they're very difficult to go up against. They're a civilization that they're going to go arbalist or maybe even longbowmen, and yet oftentimes there's still not a lot you can do to stop them, because for Britons it's really just about picking, okay, what is the trash unit that I'm going to do that's going to keep the other player from being able to counter my archers, right? Whether you're going halbs to deal with heavy cavalry, or whether you're going with Britain light cav to deal with skirmishers, right? So, plus if you get to Warwolf trebuchets, you are winning all of the Treb wars in Imperial Age, and they're very powerful as well. So Britons have a lot going for them. Bulgarians are going to go into B tier. You can have a really quick men-at-arms rush with Bulgarians, so you can play very aggressively, which is a really nice strength of theirs. But because you lack crossbows in Castle Age, you have to play them differently. You can't do the standard men-at-arms and the archers that you do with every other civilization, right? And so you have to play them strangely, maybe going for something like men-at-arms scouts. You could open one ranged skirmisher, but then if the other player then makes scouts, then now you got to put down a stable. And so it can get, so it's just a little awkward to play. It's worth noting Bulgarians, I think, do have some other options. They have actually pretty nice heavy cavalry archers, but you don't have a bonus in the mid game to really help you get to them. So it can feel a little bit awkward to play compared to the fact that you have some knights that you can get into with some cheap blacksmith upgrades. You get stirrups, you can have the strongest knights on the field in late castle, early imp. So you're kind of telegraphed down a melee line, even though you do have some other options that can make you a bit easier to predict, and and you don't have quite the eco to just overwhelm people, right? Even though you can get your upgrades nice and quick on those units. So good civ, but a bit tough. Burgundians, probably higher in a pro tier list. They have a sick eco bonus, right? Being able to research eco upgrades and age earlier and for less cost. But at a mid-elo, it's a little bit harder to incorporate that. Their cavalry is unusual. You're missing bloodlines, but your technologies are cheaper, so it's cool, but you can fall behind other cavalry civs, especially if you get outmassed. Cavalier takes a long time to get to, and it takes up the research time in a stable as well. So you might find yourself being outmassed by enemy knights that have bloodlines, and getting cavaliers kind of trying to get up to compete with that at that point. So it can be kind of awkward for a mid-elo. They have really nice gunpowder, but again, Burgundians, like gunpowder play is a bit less common at mid-elo, and so it's kind of tougher to integrate. Next on this is Burmese. Burmese are going to go to the C tier. You're missing the second armor upgrade on your archers, and that's really tough because you see archers a lot, and that means that your archers are really going to fall if somebody else is going archers in Castle Age, say with Expos. Your unique unit, which is pretty strong, is technically classified as a cavalry archer, so it can be more easily countered by ranged units. And it also means that you really can't make skirmishers to compete with other civilizations' ranged units, right, when they go range. And so that's just a major limitation on their game. And outside of that, they just don't really have the strong power unit. A Rambai can be countered by skirms, and that's no good. Elephants can be pretty easily countered by monks. So it's kind of an awkward civ to play, so I got to put it in C tier. Byzantines, going to go into A tier, right? Byzantines in the A tier look, one of the most flexible civilizations in the game. True that they lack an eco bonus, right? Very true. But you have a lot of different options you can go for. It's very difficult to predict. The Cataphract can be a nice power unit to build your army around, though it is hard to get to. It has been made cheaper in recent patches. And the faster Imperial Age uptime can, if you can make the game last a little longer, oftentimes you can still be the first person to imp, get your trebs out quicker, and you have the good, cheap defensive units in order to protect that. So at a mid-elo level, I gotta say A tier. B tier is going to be where our Celts land. Celts are just, they're a really good civ early. They have one of the best eco bonuses in the game. It's just their military can be kind of awkward to deal with. Your Expos become obsolete by mid-Castle Age. Your Knights lack bloodlines, and you also miss the last armor upgrade, so you can't commit to Knights. And so you're just very telegraphed down one path, and you don't get Bombard Cannon. So if you go, say, Halb Siege Ram, another civ can have things like Bombard Cannons to stop you. They have some difficult matchups. I think that they do have things going for them with the early rush, and if you can get to something like, Halb Siege, maybe Elite Woad Raiders, which are really only good when they're elite, unfortunately. You can do some things with Celts. The Huang Rush, shout out to Huang, is a strong mid-game strategy with Celts, but it's just hard to master at a mid-elo sort of rating, and so you're just not going to see it as much. Chinese are going to go into A tier. Chinese are an easy S tier civilization at the high level. At a mid-elo level, players have to start down decently, but probably only, say, get 1 villa head as opposed to 2 villa head, which is the standard at higher levels. But you have a lot of strong units, population-efficient units, good arbalists, good cavalier, heavy cavalry. You have really nice trash. You have fully upgraded camels. There's a lot going for them. The cheaper technologies is great for the Chinese. You're a little weak to siege onagers because you lack bombard cannon, but that's okay, right? It's a little bit of a weakness, but not that bad. And yeah, there's just a really good all-around civilization. In the hands of a mid-elo player, they're just not being optimized as much, and they can also be a little vulnerable to early rushing, which you do see a lot at mid-elo levels. Okay, Cumans. I'm also going to put Cumans in the A tier. Cumans can do a lot of things that are unusual that players can struggle against. You oftentimes see, how to respond to the 2-town center boom, seeing siege workshops being made in feudal age. The cheap stables and archery ranges now can enable some interesting strategies. Late game hussar raids are really strong with Cumans. You have some options, right? You really have options. And the faster cavalry, it's hard to run away from them so they can dictate fights. Really just the issue with Cumans is the fact that since they can do so many unusual things, in the hands of somebody who's more of a mid-elo player, they might not be as efficiently orchestrated, and that can create some problems. And also missing Bracer, I think, really hurts their skirmishers in late game. Their kip checks are really good, but they can just be a little squishy, and they lack the range to stay away from opponents. So you really got to micro them hard to keep them alive, and that's harder at mid-elo levels. Ethiopians are going to go S tier, right? Again, this would probably be lower in a pro list, but Ethiopian archers are so strong and so hard to deal with that you can really fall behind. Ethiopians can get some really nice early men-at-arms rushes because they get 100 food, 100 gold on aging up. The pikeman upgrade is free, so you can, not only do you have extra DPS to deal with knights from your archers, but you also can start integrating spears into your army much earlier. They become pikes, and even if somebody gets to, say, early knights to try to respond to your crossbows, you can have pikemen there to deal with it. You also get a great siege workshop, and so you can really you can destroy towns pretty quickly with Ethiopians. The really only downside is that they have not so good cavalry. You do get camels if you need to deal with enemy cavalry, though. And again, the free pikeman upgrade is already kind of helping you out with there. So, it's not a perfect civ, but it is a civ that you know what they're going for, and it can be hard to stop. Franks is next. Franks, easy S tier. Knights are extremely common at mid-elo levels because they're so strong, and yet they're also so fast, and Arabia is very open these days. Franks have good early game bonuses with the faster berry collection. That's very passive. You don't have to change your gameplay. You just get the benefits. And the free farming upgrades as well means that your farms, you don't have to worry about getting that as well. And that's, again, very smooth. You just start seeding farms when you can. You don't got to worry about it. So Frank's easy S tier. And they have other options than cavalry. Throwing axemen are good. Fully upgraded halberdiers are nice. Fully upgraded champions, bombard cannon. They're just a very good civilization. Goths are going to go into B tier, right? I used the example earlier. Goths are unusual to go up against, right? You could be playing against Goths. I can't tell you how many times I've dealt with some Goth forward with militias being spammed, around, say, like 8 minutes. That can throw you off as a mid-elo player, right? It's difficult to deal with. So you can throw people off. How many times Goth players will try to lame your resources very early in the game, different things that distract you that pro players may deal with more easily. But Goths, they're still limited, right? They have some options, actually. You have okay hussars. You're missing the less armor upgrade, but they're usable. You do get Bracer with skirms. You have really cheap halberdiers. So you have options, right? I mean, with Goths, it's all about not letting them get to the late game. And you don't have the really eco bonus. It's kind of hard to tech into their knights for the duration, so you just kind of know it's coming, and that means that Goths can have some pretty rough matchups. They force you to play a bit differently, but you can counter it, so it's not as major of a power spike, say, or it's not as hard to stop as, say, like, I don't know, like Britain Arbalist, right? Where Britain Arbalist, are just like, there's not a lot, there's not, excuse me, I'm going to hydrate for a sec. There's not a lot of answers. You just have to do something different. Whereas with Goths, if a civ has fully upgraded champions, that's kind of tough for a Goth army to deal with. You kind of have to outmass them. But if somebody's already setting up to go for it, with supplies and DE, that's a major nerf to Goths, because now civilizations can really compete at a cost-efficient level with Goths. So that's there. Let's go on to the Huns. Huns are going to be an A-tier civilization. Very, very good. They're probably right on the border between S and A tier, honestly. I think at the mid-ELO level, the reason they got to go A tier is because mid-ELO levels players can get a bit sloppy, and the fact that you can't wall with houses to get your defenses shored up and protect your economy, I think really hurts at a mid-ELO level, much more than a pro level where you can play a bit more efficiently. You have a lot of options with Huns. You have a really nice stable to go for scouts and knights. You have the cheap cavalry archers that are quite good, and they're a really right. And because they're cheaper, you can mass them up quicker. You are kind of right. You have pretty bad swordsmen, so you have a lot of trouble countering trash units with Huns. So that can be difficult. Even though your trash units are okay, you do get halberdiers. They lack the last armor upgrade. Your siege is meh, but you do get siege ram and some accurate trebuchets. So you have options with the Huns. But you're a little telegraphed, right? But you're telegraphed into either melee or range. So it's a little bit more difficult to predict. There actually is a similarity, I think, with the Bulgarians in that you actually have, if you want to go heavy cav archer hussar, Hun cav archers have the same performance stats as Bulgarian cav archers. But the difference, right, is whereas Bulgarians, you don't have that eco bonus that makes it easier to get into. With Huns, right, because they're so much cheaper, it's much easier to get to, say, a heavy cav archer hussar combination. And so, Huns are less awkward to play to get to the combinations you want to get to, and you can get to multiple combinations, right, whether range or melee. Maybe even Halb Siege Ram is not even a bad thing to go for. Okay, Incas. I'm going to put Incas in the A tier. I didn't start off thinking about them in this list. I think they're probably a little higher at mid-ELO levels than they are at a pro-ELO level, but look, they're kind of like the American Byzantines. You can react to a lot of different kind of units. You have a lot of different counter units that you can go for, whether you're going Kamyuks or Slingers or Eagles with insane pierce armor to deal with archers. You get some modest eco bonuses, but you get quite a few of them. Free llama to start off with, stone discount on your stone buildings, your houses host double the population. There's a lot you can do with Incas, actually. The trouble is, I think with every Mesociv, you do lack knights, and that is a deficiency. I don't think you have quite the eco to really, turbo into options. And the options that you have to turbo into, a lot of them are pretty gold heavy, whether it's Eagles or Kamyuks or Slingers. And so, it's kind of different than Byzantines, whereas Byzantines are really good at saving the cost on their counter units. Incas are a little bit more awkward to play, but I think that the options are so strong that they still make it into the A tier. Indians are going to go in B tier. There's a lot that Indians can do that are really nice. You're missing the entire knight line. That's a major deficiency. Camels don't quite make up for it. You also don't have Arbalist, so if you want to go range and you need to commit to range, then you really need to go heavy cav archer, which is pretty common to see. You have a great eco bonus with cheaper villagers, and the Sultan's technology. It's kind of a nice eco bonus too in the mid game if you can get it. But you're really just kind of pigeonholed into uh, the cavalry line, whether you're going heavy cav archers or camels. And camels, now that Indian camels only get 4 pierce armor in the late game, are still pretty vulnerable. Or now they're much more vulnerable to archers than they were, and that can be tricky to deal with. I think you really need to get the Imperial Camel upgrade to get better than just generic camels with Indians, and that's expensive in a 1v1. So a little awkward to play, but still they have some great options. The 5 pierce armor light cavalry in Castle Age can be very strong against archers and very unexpected. So you can do some things to the Indians, but they're a bit different to play. Italians, you know, Italians have a pretty modest eco bonus. You can modify your build to take advantage of it, but you're only really getting maybe say like 1 villager extra uptime. I don't know if it's worth it. You have a pretty welcoming tech tree, I think overall, but you're notably missing halberdier, and you also don't have camels. So heavy cavalry can become tricky. Italians get the Genoese crossbowmen to kind of deal with that, but that can be very, very awkward to transition into, especially if you're probably playing archers or archers into expos from feudal to Castle Age, and you already get some pretty nice arbalist with the Castle Age upgrade that gives you some extra melee and pierce armor. So it can just feel weird transitioning into Genoese crossbowmen, but also don't have the range that expos and arbalist have. So you just wind up feeling like you could die to other arbalists perhaps, and so it's just awkward to play. But they do have a lot of options. Cheaper gunpowder is nice for your bombard cannons, but otherwise it's kind of hard to integrate gunpowder options like hand cannoneers. I think on Arabia you don't tend to see them as much at mid-elo. Japanese, I'm going to put Japanese. Ooh, computer's slowing down a little bit. Oh, they are? Okay, all right, we're good now. Japanese are going to go A tier. You can get some really solid early rushes. You have a really strong early game eco bonus that saves you a ton of wood. A decently flexible tech tree where you can kind of counter other units with units. You have some things in the game that you're the great or best at even. Probably have the best quality infantry. You probably have the best towers, like maybe Koreans would argue against you, but your towers have a lot of DPS to them once you get Yasama, which is very cheap to tech into. Maybe you have the best trebuchets if you can research Kataparuto. Kind of expensive. You don't see it as often, but still, right? So you have a siege option. You have the entire archery range at your disposal, which is really nice, right? Especially for having very strong infantry. So, the problem with Japanese is that you just tend to get weaker as the game goes on, and if games get to Imperial Age, sometimes you wind up finding that it's a bit of a struggle to really just like slam into other civs, and then that can allow people to make some comebacks. So, can be a little awkward, but I think just given what they can do with some absurd early up times with really strong men-at-arms, I think you got to give them A tier for their openings and their flexibility. Khmer also going into the A tier. Great eco bonus, pretty solid, like really solid knights. You can get some nice up times. Lacking the fact that you don't need to make buildings to get to the next age is a blessing, but sometimes it's a curse because you may be missing units. Say you may be missing spears to deal with enemy scouts. And then your military power units do kind of fall off in Imp. Ballista elephants are kind of awkward. You don't quite have the military. You are stuck with two-handed swords, so you don't get champions to deal with the inevitable halberdiers that are going to be made to go against your cavalry. Arbalest missed thumb ring, so they don't have quite the damage. They don't have the damage output that you'd like, so a little awkward. But you just have such a great eco bonus, and you can get these really absurd up times. It's kind of like the Japanese in that you get a little bit weaker, I think, as the game goes on. But you have some good options, and even if your military is a little weak, sometimes just by spamming units with Khmer and their and the faster farms, because villagers are not having to drop off at a particular location, I think can turbo you into A tier. Koreans B tier. Having the free archer armor upgrades, it's sick. Can enable you to really take advantage of power spikes, and that's pretty nice. Cavalry is really bad, and that's a struggle on Arabia. Um, your infantry, you have some okay infantry options. You don't really have a good eco bonus to take advantage of the faster stone mining. You really kind of have to go into towers, and that's just awkward at mid elo because you have to really know what you're doing. And so I think that they're a kind of limited, but they do have some strong moves. War wagons are pretty sick, and having the free archer armor upgrades for them really makes them strong early. And the stone mining can help you get to that composition a bit easier. So I think they're limited, but they have some things going for them, and that's good enough for B tier. Lithuanians, S tier. Uh, you know, it's a bit unusual in that their eco bonus is a fantastic early game, but really kind of trails off. But the thing with Lithuanians is that you can just get such absurd uptimes and really fast openings that you can have somebody fall behind pretty early in feudal. You have really nice knights that if you just collect a couple relics, can be very strong in Castle Age. Your trash is fantastic. I think it's probably the best trash in the game. And your military is still pretty flexible. Your heavy cav archers, you're missing Parthian tactics, but they're not bad as a high DPS unit, say, that you would put behind winged hussars. Like, that's pretty good. I think missing Parthian tactics is a big deal, but still, like, hey, you also have winged hussars. You often have maybe the best skirmishers in the game. You can have paladins potentially with +2 attack over fully upgraded paladins. So you just got a lot of things you can do with Lithuanians, and even though they lack that durable eco bonus, I think you can just really get ahead of people and just do some things with them that you just can't do with other civilizations. Magyars are going to go into A tier. This would probably be a B tier civ in a pro listing, maybe even a C tier civ, because you don't really get an eco bonus. But again, players don't play as efficiently at a mid elo level, so the lack of optimization isn't hurting you as much here. And Magyars have really nice power spikes. They have a really open military tech tree that they can go into, and so just there's a lot that can be done with them. I actually think that the foot archers having +2 line of sight for a mid elo player can help you spot things that you otherwise might not see, and so you can play more opportunistically, catching stray villagers, and you'll see those mangonels coming. A few seconds earlier, you can preserve units, and they just have such powerful units, whether it's heavy cav archers, paladins, fully upgraded arbalist with the extra line of sight. Just so many things they can go into. So that's a A tier civ for the Magyars at mid elo. Right? Malay. The faster uptimes can make for some awkward transitions where you might not have the resources you expect to. You really are missing power units. Cheap elephants is nice, but they're still countered by monks because heresy is expensive to get to. And then they would just die anyways. So it's still a lot of resources down the drain, even if you had researched the absurdly expensive heresy. And yeah, they just kind of lack power. So they're just awkward to play, I think, for mid elo. Malians are going to go to A tier. Some good eco bonuses. Pretty diverse military, actually. It's an awkward transition to Imperial Age, and I think you're a little telegraphed into going melee units because you miss Bracer. But it is hard to predict what they're going to do in Castle Age because their expos are fine. You got good knights, you got good camels, and you're probably going to see cavalry in the Malian army in late game. So, but whether it's going to be cavaliers, camels, or light cav, all benefiting from the Farimba upgrade, giving them extra attack. Kind of hard to predict. And also, since their infantry get extra pierce armor in each age, they're one of the few civilizations that can, other than, say, Goths who are making Huskarls, but their infantry, their swordsmen, or even pikemen can run down archer units, which can be very difficult. So they can provide some matchup problems. And they're also very versatile, too. So, there's a lot they can do. Right? Mayans, easy S tier civ. You just have a lot of great options. great eco. Plumed archers, even if you know they're coming, can be difficult to stop. Eldorado eagles sometimes just feel indestructible, invincible. So, yeah, Mayans got to be S tier. Mongols, Mongols, I think also have to be S tier, right? Mongols would not be S tier, I think, in a pro player listing, but here at the mid elo, where with the faster acquiring hunt, you can just get these absurd uptimes, really punish people who are playing standard, and you have a really flexible military in the mid game, even though you don't really have an eco bonus. So if somebody is going knights, right, you can go camels and you can keep that mobility while you're trying to get to Mangudai, which is probably the most powerful unique unit in the game. You can get some really nice light cavalry and hussar options in the late game. And Mongols are a little like Celts, I think, in that you're really, really strong early, really, really strong late. I think Mongols are probably stronger than Celts later on a map like Arabia that's a bit more open and where raiding is so prevalent. But the difference, I think, is that Mongols have a bit more military flexibility in Castle Age, where your camels will be fine, your knights will be fine. You can go with higher HP light cav. You can make step lancers and try to find a purpose for them. I think we're all kind of waiting on that. And Yeah, and so you can find you have some decent options. You get Arbalest with Bracer, which if you for some reason you don't want to go Mangudai and you want to go say something like Arbalest Hussar, that's a real option with Mongols. So yeah, S tier they can really do a lot. I've had a lot of times playing Mongols where people will try really bizarre strategies just to throw me off because they're so scared of Mongols at this elo. Okay, Persians, B tier. You have all the units at the stable, which is really nice. Um, you know, a nice modest Dark Age eco bonus, getting a little bit extra food, a little bit extra wood. I think that the faster working town centers from Feudal Age onward sometimes is more of a curse than it is a blessing, where you actually don't wind up having the resources you need, and if you're already not as efficient of a player, then that can mean that you actually really struggle with production with Persians. So that can be kind of awkward. You have a lot of trouble dealing with trash units because you miss Bracer and you even miss two-handed swordsman. So, and the kind of answer to all of that is that Persians can get crossbowmen that don't cost gold. But that can be really awkward to get to, I think. And I don't think it's a substitute for missing out on a trash killing unit like the champion, or hell, even the two-handed swordsman, just because they'll still die pretty easily if somebody goes skirmishers. So that unit can be kind of dismissed. So it's difficult, but still, like you have a lot of things you can do. The being able to do extra damage against archers with your knights is really nice. So I think Persians are a nice B tier civ for mid elo. Poles, got to put Poles in the A tier. There's really nice eco bonuses, a pretty diverse military with pretty good arbalist. The Obuch is their unique unit, and man, it can really help your other units because it's tanky. It scrapes armor off of other units, and now all of a sudden your arbalist or even your skirmishers may be doing +3, +4, maybe +5, let's say, damage against paladins or something. And it's a great trash killer too, so it's really hard to go halberdiers if somebody, say, has like Obu and say like Winged Hussar, or they're super cheap Knightsman, because the Obu can absorb a lot of shots and they just they'll wreck your halberdiers, so it's really hard. They are a diverse civ and have some difficult matchups they create. Portuguese, I think Portuguese are pretty underrated. I know that they have a reputation for having a low win rate in 1v1. And, I think it's worth considering why that is. But I think that the gold discount, enables you to do some more unusual moves, say like double gold compositions, like Knight Expo in Castle Age. Or say you could go in early 3 ranges in Feudal Age if you want to overwhelm an opponent's archers and really get your numbers high. Your siege weapons don't cost very much gold, and so you have a lot of advantages. And I think that maybe one of the reasons they struggle is to take advantage of that, say like a double gold composition, you still got to spend a lot of gold, right, to do that. And you might still wind up spending a bit more gold, but to get a much more, higher quality composition. Um, the thing with gold in Age of Empires is that gold really becomes more of an issue when it's scarce. So the fact that gold is a scarce resource is true more for Imperial Age than it is for Castle Age. So I think that's why the for the Portuguese, the bonus is because of the way people probably play Portuguese, the gold bonus is probably helping later in the game. A lot of times people say that Portuguese lack power, but I think that has more to do with the fact that people aren't taking advantage of the cheaper gold to get more power on the field. Because you do have fully upgraded Cavaliers and fully upgraded Arbalists, so you do have some powerful units that you can go for. And I think it's just about using the gold bonus to get you there. Saracens, I'll put Saracens in B tier as well. You have a pretty open tech tree, but with a few exceptions, and that you're missing Cavaliers and you're missing Halberdiers. Those are two really important units to miss. Camels can kind of make up for missing Halberdiers, but Camels don't make up for missing Cavalier. So you're a bit limited, but you do get fully upgraded Arbalist. You get a nice siege workshop. I think that the market eco bonus can be helpful at a mid elo, but maybe not used as effectively as say like at the higher tier. So, um, you know, I think that they have some limitations, but they still have a lot going for them. Okay, Sicilians going to go into A tier. Sicilians, because their units take less bonus damage, man, you can have some strong options. Your skirmishers can feel really strong against other skirmishers. Your archers can last a bit longer in feudal if you're going, say, men-at-arms into archers and they respond with skirmishers. You can take fights with scouts or knights against enemy spears or pikes that would be difficult to take. The bonus damage bonus, I think, does wear off a bit in Imp, where halberdiers are doing so much bonus damage that they're still decently cost efficient. So, it can wear off. That can wear off a little bit, but it's still pretty strong. Being able to get 8 Pierce Armor Cavaliers is very strong as well, and helps you rating. The only thing with Sicilians, I think, and so you get. Oh, and I will say you get Arbalist and Bracer, even though you're missing Thumb Ring, so that's an option for you too. Just the only thing with Saracens, I think, is that your eco bonuses don't really kick in until early Castle Age. And now when they do kick in, they're really strong, I think, because you can find yourself with a lot of wood to make lots of town centers. You start off with extra stone, so you can really get to 4 TCs pretty quick with Sicilians, quicker than other civilizations can. And you have the wood savings to be able to make those farms, but you got to get there. And so I think that probably keeps them from getting into the S tiers. They just don't quite have. They're just quite not strong enough at all phases of the game, but still pretty strong, I would say, overall. Okay, Slavs. Slavs are going to go into B tier here. Really nice economy with the farming upgrades. You are a bit limited in your military compositions down a melee path, and that can be a bit easy to predict. You don't get paladin, and so you're still gonna have a powerful unit in the cavalier if you want to go for it, but it's just very countered by halberdiers. You can respond with some cheaper scorpions, but that can be a bit awkward too. Still useful. Like there's things you can do with Slavs. You have some answers, but you are kind of pushed in a particular direction with Slavs. It would be nice if they benefited from supplies, the free supplies that they get in Dark Age, so their men-at-arms could be a little cheaper on the food. But as it stands, I think having free supplies doesn't really do much for them as a civ. So they're a bit limited, but they do have some decent options. If you can get to Druzina infantry, that can be very strong. But can still die to range, and and is really expensive. So I don't know if that's as effective. Spanish, I'm gonna go to C tier. In Spanish, it's either conks or cav, and conquistadors are pretty easily countered by skirmishers, and I think ranged units in general actually can deal with them nicely since they only have 6 range. And knights are easily countered by halberdiers. So, and you're missing crossbow, so it's really awkward to try to go archers. And especially if you get hit early, you don't really have a good eco bonus. And so, if you start, if somebody, say, comes at you with an aggressive men-at-arms rush, you feel like you need to make archers to respond to it, which would be a very reasonable thing to do. But now you're having to commit to a unit that you're not really going to be able to upgrade. And that can just feel really frustrating at a mid-elo. And I think often mid-elo players don't want to do that. And so you wind up just feeling, like you're not playing well. Tatters. Tatters are going to go into the B tier. I think Tatters are a pretty versatile civilization, but you're kind of pushed towards cavalry archers, and so people, I think, have a good sense that it's coming. Having said that, you have a lot of bonuses like free thumb ring and free Parthian tactics to help you get there quick, and really be able to make use of them. Extra line of sight helps keep those numbers alive as well, so that can be helpful. You have you have pretty decent stables, right? You can have some of the best hussars in the game once you reach silk armor, actually. And so your heavy cav archer hussar combination can be very strong. It's just the thing, you have really terrible infantry with tatters. And so I think it can be pretty tough to deal with trash spams. You do want to get to heavy cav archer hussar is probably your best play for given the fact that you don't have champion, but it just makes you a little predictable. Even though I think that going expo with them in early Castle Age with the free thumb ring is very powerful, but everybody knows you can't stay on expo forever. So again, their transitions are predictable, and so that can be kind of tough to play with. But some decent eco bonuses and just a decent civ all around. Teutons, I'll put Teutons in B tier as well. I think this is probably a lower tier civ in a pro list. You're slow, right? A little bit too much schnitzel in the Teuton army, slowing down your knights. Having said that, right, you have some nice eco bonuses. Some nice defensive bonuses. Teutons just have a lot of bonuses in general, I think, and you don't have the greatest trash, so you're limited, but you have powerful units, right? That's the thing. For 1v1 Arabia, I think the mobility is probably a little more important, but there are things that you can do. You do have nice siege. The cheaper farms, I think, really helps keep your eco going. A lot of times you might be lacking wood, and with Teutons, you're probably not going to lack wood, so that's really helpful for them. Turks, C tier. Missing pikemen, missing elite skirmisher. You have a lot of options you can go for, but the fact that you're mining stone faster, actually in a way it puts you on more of a timer, because when the gold runs out for Turks, your probability of victory runs out as well. Turks have some really nice combinations like heavy cav archer hussar. You have great hussars. They can be super good to use. But just some of the limitations, maybe having to be more of a gunpowder civilization. I think that's harder for mid-elo players to work with. That can be tricky. Next we have the Vietnamese. Vietnamese are going to go into A tier. And, the thing with Vietnamese in the A tier is that you're really pushed on the archer line, but you do have some nice melee options. Whether it's you get halberdiers with the last armor upgrade, you get cavaliers with the last armor upgrade so they can survive. Survivability is very important for units. You're missing blast furnace, but not quite as much of a big deal. You have some nice eco upgrades. Knowing where your opponent starts is a pretty big deal in mid-elo games. You can maybe stick around at home a little longer, lure in an extra deer. Mid-ELO players often still run their scouts under town centers. Even if they don't die, they'll lose a lot of HP. And with Vietnamese, you're probably never going to have that happen to you. So they're a really nice civilization, I think. And I think that they're diverse enough to where they warrant that A tier consideration. And last, and probably most controversial, I think, Vikings are going to go into the B tier. Remember, this is a mid-ELO tier list, right? Pro level, this is A tier, maybe even S tier, right? But at the mid-ELO level, yes, obviously you're still benefiting from free wheelbarrow and free handcart, but you're already not as efficient, so that's more covering up for deficiencies than optimizing you to turbo into the next age and get those massive advantage in a setting like this. And your military is pretty weak on the whole. You get nice archers, fully upgraded arbalist is nice, but your cavalry is awful, right? And a pro player might be able to make a Viking night rush really work. Against at mid-ELO, it's going to be a little bit harder. Your Dark Age is generic, so you can still be vulnerable to some of those very early attack plays. And, when you fall behind, right, it can be kind of hard to come, you're really relying on that eco to help bring you back in the game. But the question is, what are you going to make with that eco, right? You can make expos, it's not as population efficient of a unit, right? You can easily lose them to mangonels if you don't micro correctly, and that happens a lot more at mid-ELO stages. Viking infantry is nice, but it's not all that overpowering. Berserks are nice. I'm a really good unit, but they're so expensive to get to. Chieftains as a technology is more expensive. Elite Berserk is crazy expensive, and I've never even seen Berserker Gang researched in any game I've watched that's involved Viking Berserks because, well, that's insanely expensive too. You need a lot of farms to be able to get to Elite Berserks, and, at a mid-ELO stage, farms probably aren't coming down as quickly, probably not getting that food as well. So I think for mid-ELO players, Vikings are just, they have their strong points. Their eco, I honestly think that their eco really saves them from even going down into something like a C tier, because you can do things with them. They are limited in terms of their options, so they're probably not as diverse in their tech tree as the other civs in the B tier. But the eco really saves them, and so they can still be tough to deal with, and they have some good things going for them. And it's all just about if you can get, when skirmishers are inevitably made, say, to deal with your arbalist, you have to go, well, what's next, right? And you can either stay on siege, which, given that the micro is not the best, you're probably going to lose your mangonels or a decent number of them and not preserve their numbers, because mangonel micro could be kind of hard. That's I think that really they wind up, just in terms of the way they play out in mid-ELO games, they just wind up being more of a B tier civ. So that's the tier list. This video is a little bit longer. I actually did this video once and it was even longer than this. So I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to check out my Twitch stream, that's in the link below. And I hope to see you all out there on the plains of Arabia.